Pour écouter cette session en français, veuillez cliquer en bas de votre écran sur l'onglet Interprétation et sélectionner le drapeau français.
Hello, bonjour.
Barry Saleho.
On behalf of ICLE Africa,
the African Center for Cities,
Our Future Cities,
Red Cross Crescent Climate Center,
and partners, we're excited to welcome all of you
to the Rise Africa 2022 Action Festival.
Rise Africa has been growing since 2020
as a platform for thinkers,
doers,
and enablers
committed to inspiring action for sustainable cities.
This year's theme is
creativity.
For me, this means blending skills to be able to communicate the climate change complexity in rapidly urbanizing cities.
I think we have such untapped potential in Africa when it comes to creativity. There's so much about Africa that is yet to be told.
There are so many people in the African continent who have a huge skill base and are creative in the way they approach challenges.
Creativity in Africa is about embracing our own. It's about dynamism and it's about embracing our indigenous knowledge.
I think agency is finding ways of giving power back to people, to groups, to young people, especially on a continent where it's a very young population.
I like the approach of bringing everyone together, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be this expert, this high-ranking official.
I think what agency means to me is change from the ground up.
The importance of urgency is the recognition of the past and the recognition that we've lost time.
Urgency is about acting now to build more inclusive, productive, and resilient cities.
There's this need to creatively redesign and unlearn and explore new ways of thinking.
The festival is hosting 33 sessions
with 135 provocateurs
from across Africa and the world.
Every session aims to show new ideas,
showcase ongoing action,
and launch new initiatives, bringing participants together
to chart a new route forward.
We hope that the festival program will inspire you.
At the festival, we encourage you to showcase your business and projects,
build lasting partnerships,
unleash your creative potential,
commit to sustainable action.
Rise Africa is about translating ideas into action. What actions are you going to commit to this festival?
Before the session begins, it is important to note that you're being recorded.
And by participating, you are given the consent to be recorded.
All recordings will be available on the program page after the festival.
Creative expression is vital for creating new futures for our cities.
And so we invite you to enter this session in the spirit of creativity and dreaming.
I don't expect you to clown yourselves and collapse the distance and difference between sharing bread and sharing bed. I know that feeling, so give me a break and stop the fake. They say a hungry man is an angry man, but I say I am not hungry, I am hunger. I am not angry, I am anger. I am not dangerous, I am danger. I am an abominable time bomb, able to blast limestones and thunderbolts because somehow I am torn, tried and tired. So you see, you don't have to hear the sound of my voice before you know that hunger is real, scarcity is not. So please, check the time. It's history time, passion time, meaning time, access time, free flow time, sharing time, bread time, your time, my time, our time. Now, oh, now is urgent time.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. My name is Saneli Siwenyaba. Please call me Mimi. Want to sort of bring everyone into the space, and I'm here with Luke and all the artists that were involved in the work. We're going to sort of introduce our study here and the work we did in breaking it down and interpreting it into poetry. So who you see here in the room are the people that were involved in breaking down this process. Yeah.
So what we're going to do today is really an exploration of two ways of looking at research, looking at our work, looking at our practice. We've got, I suppose, these two sides, and the session, looking at the art and poetics of urgency, is really saying there was a long body of work that we've done as this collective and a much wider group that's not here, looking into food insecurity around Cape Town. And I think this links into a much wider body of work around food, hunger in African cities more broadly, which I'm sure many of you are involved in. But I think the theme of this work and our session today and our time together is really just to explore different ways of looking into the same phenomenon, the same issues, the same suburbs, the same people, the same data sets, for want of a better term, and really thinking about how we as practitioners, researchers, activists, academics come into this work and looking at these systems in different ways. And it's not really to argue about which one is better or not, which one is better than another, but I think it's really about deepening into a practice, and it's about looking at different ways that we use data and we communicate our work for kind of greatest effect, really. So with that, we've taken time to, how we'll run today is really looking at these two sets. So we'll spend the first short part of the session looking into the original data set, which is, I think, how hunger and food security research has more traditionally been portrayed and represented. And that comes along with a lot of very good reasons for why that's done and is used in certain ways. We'll then have a little bit of time for discussion around how that portrayal and representation of the issue affects us, what it brings up for us. And then from there, we'll dive into the second part, which is around a book of poetry that was created by many of the researchers who were involved in the first part, as well as other poets who were invited into this process to reflect on that work. So that'll be about a 25-minute kind of poetry reading and process that we'll go through, and then open up to another kind of half an hour to 45 minutes of this broader discussion at the end, which really looks into our own experiences with this as a collective, as well as, I think, really trying to get into some of the practice that all of you bring to this. We'd really like this to be a discussion in which we're able to kind of learn from each other's practices in this, and just using our examples here as a starting point for that. So I think that's a bit of a framework for our time together. And yeah, I think with that, I'll hand back over to Mimi, who will introduce the first part of the food security research we were involved in.
So this is a co-research study, and I think even the work that we did with the poetry is kind of a continuation from this co-research, and it looked at simple title, Agency in South Africa's Food System, and put together by students in Berlin and co-researchers that live in communities in Cape Town. And it happened during COVID-19. So what happened was that also the students that were supposed to also come and help in South Africa to do the research could not come. And this really also then empowered the co-researchers to own this process of asking the questions and reflecting on the data and giving insights towards what would come to make this book. And I think the visions that come out of this book. And the research sites are in Fuleni in the Cape Flats. And where are the questions?
Yeah, so the research sites, I mean, were spread across the city. So look, the research looked at five different suburbs. And there were kind of teams of co-researchers then that worked within each of those suburbs around the data collection. And so there were 5 communities. The other one not on here is St. Helena, and kind of digging into 5 into those 5 specific wards and looking at how those issues were coming up there. So there were kind of 3 research questions essentially, which the research sought to kind of investigate. So the first being the kind of impact of COVID-19 on these food systems. The second really being looking at the prevalence of household food security in these communities more broadly beyond just COVID. And then the third one was how agency was perceived and applied in the context of food systems. So how much agency did people feel that they had in relation to food in their lives? From a research kind of methods point of view, we came at this from quite a number of different angles. There was a large number of household surveys that were done, 1,824 in total. There were some semi-structured interviews. There was food mapping that was done using GI. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but are you by any chance trying to present?
We are sharing, yeah. Is it not showing?
It's not showing.
Okay, maybe
the side.
Apologies. Okay.
There we go.
Okay, I think maybe the video when it opened cancelled our screen share. So apologies for that.
No problem.
Okay.
Thanks.
So let me just go back briefly then, and just to give a little bit of a sense of the location for those who are not familiar with Cape Town. So just give you a little bit of a sense of where we worked, those two regions of the city, and then specifically coming down into those particular wards within the city. So then coming back to the methods, food mapping, which is kind of using kind of GIS mapping. We did a photo voice process, focus group discussions, and then there was a kind of a range of data analysis. So you can see we came at these issues from a kind of quite a number of different perspectives, methodologically speaking. Then in terms of the results, they were broken down into, I think, 4 kind of key pillars or strands. First around policy. Okay. Then looking at how food system had been impacted by COVID, the state of food security, then kind of questions of agency in relation to food. From a policy perspective, maybe do you want to talk to this, or should I?
Let's go.
From a policy perspective, just highlighting, I think, again, that food security is enshrined, or the right to food is enshrined in our constitution in South Africa, and that there's a number of policy documents that feed into this, but often that's very difficult to interpret, and kind of where that hits the ground is often a very kind of confusing space where there's a lot of gray areas from a policy perspective. One of the, then kind of linking into the food pathways, there was a lot that was, during COVID, a lot of disconnections that came up, a number of pathways that were maybe kind of reinforced further. For example, a lot of informal traders during COVID found that their right and ability to trade during lockdowns were severely restricted, and this really impacted on people's ability to access food in the ways that they had, and also people's access to livelihoods, which then had knock-on effects to food security. The flip side of that being that many supermarkets and others were kind of considered essential services and able to kind of continue running. So there was kind of these systemic perpetuations that happened as a result of that. I won't go into this in great detail because it's not really the focus of what we're doing here, but just to give you a broader sense of what the overall kind of findings of this process was. Then as part of the mapping work, I think one of the,
So I'm also very proud to say that I got involved into this research through the mapping. And I remember having to basically look at where people get food. And it was looking at because there were a lot of also soup kitchens that were born during COVID. We had to find those, and there's puzzle shops, which are basically small shops where people can access food on an everyday basis within the communities. Look at ECD centers and schools, and sort of also really just map out the hotspots where people get food. And what was found a lot was that, especially around the bigger sort of shopping malls, and the bigger shopping malls would have a lot of cluster of other kinds of foods within that. So it was very actually hard to map those. But yeah.
Yeah, so I think also just really looking into the spatial distribution of actors within the food system. Then stepping forwards, I think looking into the prevalence of food insecurity in those different regions, looking at this kind of general scale from mild to severely food insecure. FAO's FIES system, which kind of asks people a series of questions relating to their experience of hunger and scarcity in their daily lives. And I think this kind of comes down to the kind of core of the findings, from a statistical point of view, at least. And for me, this is kind of quite a kind of contrast point, which I think will kind of contrasting what we then step into a little bit later in the session. But I think just overall, kind of really key finding being that, more than half of residents there were kind of moderately to severely food insecure in those 5 wards. And that although within this, there were obviously a number of quite big differences between wards, and with very often communities that were involved in food production, for example, St. Helena Bay, which is predominantly a fishing community, being the most food insecure. So I think one of the other things which came up, one of the findings which came up from this was really just this need to kind of challenge the notion that access to food production abilities or facilities assists in significantly reducing food insecurity in urban contexts. Again, there's a lot we could kind of dig into in this, but I think it's not really the focus of this session. The focus of this is really just to provide a contrast point to the representation. Then look down a little bit more into really who was most food insecure. Young children, smaller households, female-headed households really coming up strongly within that. And then do you want to speak briefly on the agency stuff?
Around agency, I think the one question that I can really recall back from the study was whether or not people felt they had the power to contribute or change or contribute to the food system, which is, I think, for the core researchers, is a thing that was that it was very empowering for the core researchers to be able to take part in the survey itself, but it also presented another complexity that these are people that are also experiencing food insecurity, and having to also be part of this is empowering, but also there's that part where you're dealing or grappling from, especially the looking at the severity of the food insecurity and dealing with numbers that are still also very personal. And through these numbers, we got a chance to look at the numbers, digest them, and contribute to recommendations about what's next? You know, what is it as co-researchers and having looked at the results? What is it that needs to change? And we came up with these visions that and I think, you know, our session today is actually really a manifestation of these visions. With that, communities need to talk more about food and nutrition. And I think it's also about changing the narrative through co-creation of knowledge and networks, and potentially forming food policy councils within our communities. And I think, you know, the one thing that really comes out is this, it connects again to agency and destigmatizing hunger and
So I think that kind of brings us, it was a kind of very brief kind of whirlwind tour of what was an extensive kind of 2-year body of work, you know, a 180-page report. And I apologize for not having the first slides available, but kind of just really reiterating again, you know, just so the focus of the session is contrasting the two approaches. So the one is thinking about how that portrayal of the data that came up around hunger and food insecurity in urban contexts in Africa affected us, and then kind of from that stepping through into a second viewing and a second interpretation of that. But we can maybe just take a few minutes now just to take any kind of questions, responses on the data. Are there any kind of questions from any of you from the floor on that?
Luke, maybe can I ask that you stop sharing your screen?
Yeah.
And then we can see if anybody.
Okay. All right, then I think if we can then, if there's nothing from here, we can then jump into the second, I suppose, presentation, or the second interpretation of the same information, which took place over the last month here in Cape Town, working with a group of some of the same researchers that were involved in the first study, as well as a kind of network of poets from across those same wards, which the study focused on. So if Elena, you can then jump into the video, that would be great.
Sibuya eAfrika, silapha eAfrika, mandibhotise bantwana bobawo, ndithe ndakuvela ndeva ziphalala, kwathi mandikhwaze ndaswela ilizwi, kwathi mandilile ndaba neentloni, xa ndinibona nizindwayinge nibonakala niphelelwe lithemba, kaze sobheka phi na. Imihlaba yobawo ilele, amasimi obawo alele, ngelixa iintsapho zethu zisifa indlala. Konakele phi na mzi kantu, silahle phi na mzi kantu, masibuyele nembo, masibuyele nembo. Kwakusini imvula, kwakutyiwa ukutya, kwakutyiwa nemixoxozi, sasonwabile ngelo xesha. Abantu babenezinwe besenzelana konke. Namhlanje we are crying. It is a Xhosa lament. It's not a Xhosa lament. It is the whole nation lament. We all crying for the same thing. We are dying. We've been crying. We fought, but we managed. All the fights, we win them. We defeated the people. But this fight of hunger, Why don't we fight it? Let's all stand.
Manje isizwe silambile. Ndiphaka umnikelo wothando. Sizwe esi sinikela oluphangaleleyo uthando neziqhamo. Qhama nawe apho ukhoyo. Uqhamise isizwe sikabawo.
A home without a dinner table. An onion and tomato from Madlamini next door. I know mother had to cut through her pride to ask for it. 2 blocks of stock cubes from my friend, the last of father's earnings. Maize meal from Umzala in a lunchbox. The same lunchbox contains the sore heart Umzala handed me the lunchbox with, because she would have to carry her lunchbox to another home in days to come. After a few aromas bouncing in the air, mother calls to hand us a noble plate of food. We eat from our laps. Those with homes without dinner tables do not eat for joy or to become healthier. They eat to survive. With raging appetite and numb taste buds, they swallow chunks of food along with their humanity.
Maggies vol oegies toe. Kinders moet nie kos mosie. Daar is kinders wat nie kos hê nie. Papa sê hy werk hard vir my kos en daar is papas wat nie werk hê nie. En ek verstaan die misverstand, dit het begin gister, man toe hy miste van 'n different land hier beland. Nou my mag kreën verwag reën en die note is 'n mond vol. En kinders moet nie kos mosie. Daar is kinders wat nie kos hê nie. Papa werk hard vir jou kos en daar is papas wat nie werk het nie. En ek verstaan die social distance man, kneeval vir reënval in 'n different tang. Vra ancients vir 'n vleisstuk op 'n Christmas lunch en die koortjies is rasende maggies. En kinders moet nie kos mors nie, daar is kinders wat nie kos het nie. Papa werk hard vir jou kos en daar is papas wat nie werk het nie. En ek verstaan nie die shit nie man. Wat is statistics vir 'n illiterate man? 5 bob chips en 'n pakkie biscuits man en die laitie sing liedjies van geestukkie. En kinders moet nie kos mosie. Daar is kinders wat nie kos hê nie. Papa werk hard vir my kos en daar is papas wat nie werk het nie. En ek verstaan net hoe om niks te plant. Ek sal my misgis om my te risk op hierdie system Sankooi se kind het langglas vasgevang.
Famine, O Africa laments on scarcity of food, the fruits of the earth, deprived, not equally shared. How we've come to this disaster, we have not anticipated. From hand to mouth, never enough for the whole house. The beauty and gifts of the earth are not ours. Soldiers in aprons and big spoons, steering pots for communities. Mothers at the forefront of the warfare, before the world realizes that this is war. Spear on community kitchens, spear on the hunger. We are not hungry. A wave of hunger has engulfed the African nation long ago. We are faint from hunger for knowledge of ourselves. We are hungry from deprivation, from elimination from world history. For knowledge of our spiritual ways, we are hungry. From decolorization, we are lost with no history and direction.
Part of the body. We do not plant flowers, we plow the streets that have been made poor. On the right side of the land, hands that shape the soil with beauty. On the left side of the land, bodies that merge on the streets in struggle and hope. Part of the body, part of the land. Hunger strikes. Hunger strikes not as a number, but as organs folding into each other. Intestines removing spaces, hugging each other. Acknowledging that I survive with my neighbor, You speak of hunger, we talk about feeling, embracing, surviving, overcoming hunger.
The pandemic of hunger. Hunger is bigger than the virus. Violence searches for food. Struggles, heartbreaking. Women give their bodies for food. 1994, the end of the poor and landless black farmers. Production, processing, distribution, preparation, consumption, food and food systems, structural inequalities, uneven power relations, power, race, class, gender, collective traumas, pre-existing food injustices, shaping food governance. The people want food reimagined systems. Fuleni, Khayelitsha, Mitchell's Plain, Gugulethu, St. Helena's Bay, when will the wind blow sand in between your shrubs?
Ward 4.1. Access to 123 Ward 4.1. 123, 356. Want to see access to percentage of community soup kitchens. Early childhood headed mother during COVID-19 lockdown rates increased disproportionately to the gender sensitive feminist livelihood coping strategies. To put food on the table, on average improvement markets for land and urban food production, food-related environments challenge their community-centered networks. Depression sets in. Forget the risks of crime and malnutrition. My own hand has a vision for radical and deadly food policy reform. Thankfully, food-sensitive planning, mapping related challenges centralized around the shopping mall. Shopping malls centered around sensitive planning, sensitive depression, anxiety, and hunger. For better food safety, intergovernmental panel on integrated development foundations urged the need to take a food-sensitive approach. Moving from one crisis to another, fortunately, there was a protracted pandemic polycrisis ensuring multilateral livelihoods. Informal traders were participants, 432% of whom were marginalized, disembodied results. Having shared insights on their food needs, this provides a summarized snapshot of the significant situation and highlights the need for integrated responses to keep bread particles below 340 parts per million as food prices rise sharply into the future.
So I will be presenting the results from the 2020 study of the effects of COVID-19 on food security in communities in Cape Town. And we're going to start with Khayelitsha. Food security in Khayelitsha is quite bad. It's quite bad, guys.
Why don't you just lock me in a dark room?
56% of households are food insecure, and of this 56%,
lock me in a dark room, please. Leave me.
Of these participants are women. And as
lock me in a dark room so I can experience the pain, so my depression can consume me, please. Lock me in this room.
For farming,
I just wanna feel the pain.
Support
I wanna hear the sound of my heartbeat as it slows down. The pain of my soul is slowly escaping my body. I wanna feel everything. I just wanna feel everything.
It's people
depression.
That live in large
come on, bro. Just face me head on. This war ain't over. This war ain't over. Depression. Depression, you promised to take my soul. I wanna lose my soul. Why would you give up on me? Why would you betray me? I wanna lose my soul. You promised to take my soul. The agreement between us was just plain and simple. Not this torture, not this pain, not my mind, but my soul.
348 participants.
This war isn't over. It is not over. You're still gonna take my soul. Depression. Depression, please. I'm running out of tears. I am running out of ideas.
And again,
the thoughts are deep. The thoughts are really deep. Free me. Just free me from this torture. I want to see. I just want to see what's on the other side. I want to see my dad again. Depression, please, bro. Please just make it snappy. Lock me. I want to be locked in this dark room. I don't even need a pen and a paper anymore. All they do is just slow down the process. You're on your own, depression. You're just on your own. Just seal the damn deal. You're busy targeting the innocent. What I'm here waiting for you, waiting for you, please. I need you. What's so hard in taking my soul? I mean, you've already taken my life.
They are
Why are you so stark when it comes to me? How many people have you killed? What's so special about my soul? If it's special, then it's all yours. Just take it. Depression, you betrayed me. Depression.
So, ladies and gentlemen, fight. Food injustice. Drought hits tables. Fight for food insecurity. Time waits for no man. Fight. Fight. Retain power. Fight injustice. Hunger. Raise your voice. Let it scream. Time for agency. Fight. I see resilience. Imagine. Fight for food injustice. Fight for unemployment. Raise your voice. Make it count. Fight. Stand up. Food insecurity exists. Unemployment exists. What's done? Lack of nutrition exists. Wake up. Lord, intervene. These battles are beyond us. Fight. Food categories. For different people, food injustice is still a battle. Fight for what you deserve. The time the fight goes on, it's only the start. Fight, fight, and fight. This poem is titled Sing the Song. Oh little one, you always have a song in your heart. Sing that song like the art of your heart it is. Sing from your heart that the rain is silky, wet and slippery. On cold days we lament to its icy command. We gather fire around it. We gather at war with the weather. How graceful the rain, that everything it touches, the rain comes singing from the heavens. And when it sprinkles the soil, it breaks into song. The earth breathes life and gives life to a varying variety of vegetation, fruit and flowers. Rain nourishes the soil as it fills the rivers and flows into the ocean. That earth sings the glorious song of growth and grace. Isn't it magical how we receive magical blessings for new life, for fruition and growth? Break into song when the cold rain touches your skin. Feel the magic. It is happening around you.
Let it speak its mind, color its thought. Let it channel its path away from its norm. Let it cease to see what it seeks in light. Let the soil feast what plows to greed. Let us dance for hours and hours, imagining what we seek. Let us feel what we cannot feel and outline our thoughts. Let us wonder. Let us smile. Let us dance. Let us hug. Let us feel with compassion as I stare at that delicate plant growing into a flower. Maybe one day it might be a tree. Look at me, talking about something that I observed, something that I want, something that but it could be. It genuinely could be. I mean, it will. It will. As we dance for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours for what's ours. Thank you.
I am distracted, hungry and distracted. If only I wasn't hungry and distracted, I might be able to dream. Hungry and distracted, I dare to dream. Hungry and distracted, I still dream. Yeah, that ends on dream.
My tummy never smiled. My tummy never smiled since birth. It never laughed. How can I ever love? How can I ever love when death is the only thing I love? It's been my mind's friend, the cure of this pain. Oh yes, it is a pain. Tears are my friend, tears are my friend. Oh, it's no longer the same. Since my father's death, I've been living in pain, experiencing fear. Not because of his death, but the fear of dying from starving. Yes, hunger has been striking. My tummy never smiled. Oh, my heart has been swimming in blood, sinking in pain. How can I get over this pain? How can I get over this pain? Empty stomach, empty pockets, the empty buckets, oh, the empty cupboards. You swear I'm a robot. No food, no drink, just a pain and pills. I don't even know what's a pill. Kunini nyembezi mna ndizichaphile emphefumulweni sele ndikhalabile. I mean, how many people have died? How many people are depressed? Hunger, we are not your victims. We are not your victims, even though you've dug a grave in my stomach, deep as my father's grave. Hunger, you live cradles on my stomach. There's a pain on my tummy. Hunger, you live cracks. Hunger, you live cracks. I picture death. Yes, death. And this fell. You're never gonna kill me. I'm not your victim. But if this is a war, then bring it on. Bring it on. I'm not a spoiled brat. I know the hardships of life. So I'm going to face you heads on, hands off. This is not a physical fight. I call it an emotional one, because emotionally you've been attacking. You've been striking, leaving my heart bleeding, my tummy groaning, singing in pain. Hunger, I am not your victim. Don't you dare victimize me. Sele. Ndinhlekise ehlaleni kanti Thixo mna wawenzapha emhlabeni kungoku emqaleni komile. Hunger is victimizing me. I am not your victim. Hunger, I am not your victim.
What would you tell them? I would tell them that I'm angry, that I'm confused, and it does not help that I'm hungry, and that things are bad. Things have always been bad for someone like me, for people like me.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
You are sorry? What are you sorry for? Don't you dare feel sorry for me. I don't want to be felt sorry for. Do not reduce me with your pity. That is the shame. That is you shaming me into a crumpled piece of paper. I am nothing like you think. I am not my hunger. I am not my suffering. And yet I have no choice. I am stuck in the sand-filled box, and the sand is made out of your pity. And it drowns me. For supper tonight, I will have the sand in my mouth.
Slow down. What do you want? Why are you shouting? Why are you so angry?
I am not angry, damn it. I am hungry for more. More for myself. More for my people. Don't you see? Don't you see the hunger in my eyes? In the way that I breathe, in the way that I talk? I am consumed. Sometimes I don't know who I am. Sometimes I wish I was someone else. Someone better, someone freer. Someone who can get up and say, let's go somewhere, anyway, that is far away from here.
without thinking about money and where my next meal will come from. I cannot breathe. Can you not see that? I'm barely breathing. Do you care? Do you really care?
Mama notata babe nabantwana ababili, intombi nenkwenkwe. Babesebenza ema-kitchen, utata caretaker, umama home-based care. Balishiya eli ngokuhlaselwa ngubhubhane negongqongqo wesaqhithi ucorona COVID-19. Beshiya ngasemva intombi engasebenziyo ifundela ukuba i-ECD teacher. Uyakhala ezimanjeyane kuba lento yenzeke ngobuphuthuphuthu ebomini bakhe engekabi nando esandleni, okanye udangi okanye impangelo. Acule ingoma.
Oh, hello, my child.
Hello, Doc.
How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thanks. And you? How's my father doing?
We tried our utmost best.
No, well, trying is not a word that I'm looking for right now. Can you tell me something else, please?
I was really hoping that I would provide you and your family with some positive news. However, we tried our utmost best to resuscitate your father.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we've lost him.
Acule ingoma.
Ukuba bendazine ukuthi usamshiya ngenda ndikuxelele ukuba ndingathanda.
Bangenelele abamelwane ngelithuthuzelayo.
Xola mama, xola tata, sekunjalo. Xola mama, xola sana, sekunjalo.
Aphakamise ubuso bakhe avuthulule avakale esithi ndiyekile ukuziqenya nokoyika abantu.
Ndiyekile ukuziqenya nokoyika abantu, ingaba ndimlo uphakayo. Ndiyekile ukuziqenya nokoyika abantu, ingaba ndimlo uphakayo. Ndiyekile ukuziqenya nokoyika abantu, ingaba ndimlo uphakayo.
Uyangena umntwana owabo next door ekhala ngesisu esibuhlungu ezibhijabhija. I've got pain in my stomach, Mom.
I've got a pain in my stomach. Oh, Mama, please help. I've got a pain in my stomach.
Mama is crying out loud.
Lord, what can I do? Oh Lord, what can I say? Lord, what can I do? Oh Lord, what can I say? Because this is the world of troubles, and this is the world of sorrows. This is the world of troubles, and this is the world of sorrows.
Coronavirus victims, they end up leaving behind child-headed homes, poor food delivery during COVID-19, unlabeled food, no idea if it's original and unnutritious.
Oh, yeah,
kind of walking that journey with us. It's a very different telling of the same story. And yeah, so what we'd hope to do now is really just to open up for some kind of questions and discussions. So yeah, and to bring some voices in from the process. So I thought maybe we could just first open up just to the floor if there are any questions on the process or to any of the artists. Most of them are here. We could do a round of questions there before we open up. Just feel free to raise a hand or jump in or post a question in the chat. Auntie Wishila, I see you're here too. Please feel free to comment. If there's other researchers who are involved or online too, please don't feel shy to jump in.
It's very quiet. I mean, I think the one thing, especially in this, in the process, the process of having taken in the data and having had the discussions, and then really how deep-seated, or what kind of deep-seated emotions that came out during the process was quite powerful for me personally, but I think even for the artists, and I would love to really also direct this to you guys in how your experience was in the process. We never really, yeah.
Oh, right. Let me go. So firstly, I don't know, for me, when we began, it was about how we're going to take somewhat, because it's research, it means there's a certain structure to it and how it should be delivered to people for consumption. And I was more worried about how we're going to be able to interpret all of that into a creative work. And when we got there, the first few days were just about our individual projection and how we're going to share the space. And I think more than anything, that was the most creatively free I've been while being structured around what type of response I should have. So yes, definitely, I loved it. And I think it was also even nicer for me to produce a piece of work that I have no personal attachment to. It was a very different writing style for me, and being able to deliver according to somewhat loose guidelines and still be hitting the core and the fundamentals of the research on point in that creative piece of work was an amazing experience from my side. And sharing the space with the other artists as well, because we all read the same data sets, but all these different interpretations came about, and yeah.
I mean, maybe Tyler, can I invite you in? Is there a question on the floor? Okay. So I see a question from Nicole. Were the results in poetic or ordinary form represented to any of the research participants? If so, how, and what was the response? I mean, I think you guys have been quite involved in that. I'll let you handle that.
Can you read that out loud again?
Were the results in poetic or ordinary form presented to any of the research participants? If so, how, and what was the response? I mean, Mimi or maybe Lulek, one of you want to take that, or Kutala? Just in terms of how the data was, like the first round of research from the agency study was presented back to participants of the study and how they experienced that. And we haven't presented the poetics back to anybody else yet, but the first round has been. So I think this is a kind of first step in a process of presenting and rethinking this work and how it's presented. So, I mean, Kutala, maybe you just want to speak a little bit from your experience just around presenting the first results from the study back and some of the challenges you faced with that, and maybe also reflect a little bit on how you think the poetry might be received.
Okay, from the
Just
research.
speak out, speak
From
loud.
the research, hello everyone. From the research feedback, what I picked out of from what I received from the participants, the main thing I picked up is the way, like their response gave me an idea of people. They are there, they are aware of some of the things out there and how the food, more especially how the food system is being shaped. But then what makes them not to have that kind of a movement, if I may say, or an agency and a freedom of expressing themselves. They're not aware of the spaces out there, like things like agencies, the spaces out there where they can go and speak out on their rights and find out about their rights and also express themselves as to what do they like and not to like. That I picked one from the questions as well, the survey questions where you had to ask, do you know where your food comes from? Do you know how is it being distributed, and also where like the origin of your food and how it's being shaped there. So people, they didn't have an idea. A few had an idea, but the majority, they were not aware of how things are, and also also how the system is being shaped. It also makes them not to like kind of like open up, because we are so positioned, we are positioned in a way that we do things according to the system. As you can see in our malls, you hardly find ethical shops. You find this,
I mean,
ways. And then that is what I picked from the participants, like the few that I shared the feedback with, is that they so wish that they can, form a movement or an agency where they can fight for their rights when it comes to food, because food is the main source anyway for our lives. But then where to go and who to approach and how to go about, because at the end of the day, the societal structures, the government itself will kind of like overcome them, because they don't have the power to stand on their own. The second question on the poetic, like the difference between the two. The play came when I was on stage. When I was on the stage, I was called to be on the stage. So these are two different stories. Then I combine them. What came to my mind as I'm watching it now, not at the time when I was like on the stage. Now, as I'm watching now, what came to my mind, I picked something which is, I find that it's also, because I'm part of the society as well. So now I picked something from the first part of the story where my father died, and I sing that song. If I knew, I would have expressed myself how much I loved him. Something comes to my mind, like my father was a commercial farm worker, and at the time I had that idea of an indigenous food system, like the indigenous food and how we grow food in the olden days at home, as also he was a farmer. So then what comes to my mind is I ask myself, if I ever shared with my father of what I like, how do I see the future when it comes to food? And that I missed. I never did that. And my father was a farmer too, while working on the farm, was a cattle farmer, and at home, back home, was farming. But, with all these resources, they were getting there. And then he left me without sharing my ideas, so that I can be able to when you share, and then I pick up something from here, and then he leaves me with something. He leaves me knowing that what I like most.
we just want to make some time. And so I think it's
so it's only start coming now. So I'm sorry.
No, it's great. I mean, so I think there's responses coming up around how you make it, like how you turn it into a more vernacular format, in a sense. Like, and I know it was something which you'd mentioned before, and I think others had raised just around how it's been quite difficult for people to interpret the statistics and the numbers represented in the first round. And I don't know if Uleka or either of you have also things you want to add on that, just in terms of that, trying to present it back, the dialogues you've been holding to try and do that, and the kind of unpacking that's been necessary.
Okay. In terms of the dialogues, okay?
Yeah, pick up on
we didn't post any dialogues. We only had the mini dialogues where we were approaching some of the participants and the community members on giving them the feedback, because we didn't have enough time for the dialogues. But from the dialogues, like I said earlier, that was one of the main things that we picked. And yeah, that's the main thing that we picked during those meetings, besides the dialogues that we didn't pick. So when it comes to the poem thing,
I want to really draw, and I want to draw from what Mrs. Kutala was saying, and there's also the question of Nicola, I think, the response, and I'm going to make it very personal. When I was watching the videos for the first time, and I was sitting in a public restaurant, and I'm watching these videos, and I start crying, very, very publicly, and I can't stop myself. So and again, it really there's a lot that comes out of the work when you're really in the process now, and in really opening up the statistics. I feel like they are kind of like a shell, and once you crack it open, there's a lot of emotions that come out. There's trauma that comes out, and that I saw it while we were unpacking, while in the process, and I felt it in myself as well. So as much as we haven't really, this is the first time we're showing this poetic response to you guys. I am also responding to that question based on how I sort of received the work. And Sister Leka,
Just before you jump in, I was going to pose a provocation, which is a sense of, did you ever experience, you were involved in both processes, and you've delved quite deeply into both these bodies of work in a way. Like, did you ever have that same experience, or what was your embodied experience of the first set or the first process?
I think, the first process, the one thing that was a bit tough to work around, especially when we were providing the insight, was, navigating that space of, what came out was this indignity around hunger. And from that indignity, there's a self-blame. There's a lot of self, I should be doing better. I should have a job. I should have this. And how do you navigate that? And you're still dealing with statistics, but you're dealing with statistics, and you're fully aware that, hey, this is not my fault. I'm not the only one that's going through this. And yet you have these feelings that are very personal, that are based on you and your individuality. And so there was that grapple for me, and in also trying, because the question came out on why do we blame, why do people that live in poverty blame themselves? And it's navigating that self-blame with accepting that this is not my fault, but then if you accept that this is not your fault, it also feels like you're not doing anything about it, so there's that friction. Yeah.
And I think what would be, maybe if you could kind of almost respond to that a little bit in light of thinking how these two different ways of looking at that same question come up. Just in terms of that, if you're able to frame your response in light of it.
Which question?
Well, I mean, just what Mimi's brought up. I mean, just in terms of the different approaches to thinking about this and feeling into it.
Okay. Good day, everyone. Looking on what Mimi has just mentioned, in a way that everyone is always like taking the blame. As we say, you have to shift the blame. Taking that blame is not that you just take the blame, it's because of being labeled. Most of the time, as I said, if you can remember today, it's Africa Day. We always being labeled as lazy people because we are in, as we mentioned, that the lands, our forefathers, lands and farmers are just there, but we can't do anything with them. And if you look at that, that's where we're starting accepting the blame, because when someone is labeling you, you are so lazy, you end up accepting that. But it's not because you are lazy. Being unemployed and you don't have any ways of self-sustain, then you're like, what can I do? I should have done this, but what is that you should have done? Because you're unemployed, you don't have a space to start growing your veggies or anything. But when someone just came and labeled you, it's easy for that person to come and label you like, you lazy, you're doing nothing. You still, yeah, you're hungry. So the label on its own, you end up accepting it. It's like, really, I'm lazy. But at the end of the day, it's not because you're lazy. Due to lack of resources and lack of knowledge, where to start, where to go. That is affecting you and the way of doing things, because we start having those bad names and everything being labeled and stigmatized. It's where we realize that when we go out there were many homes that were left child-headed because the parents passed away due to COVID. But not everyone did know about that. And still those kids that are staying in that household, they don't have that confidence of going and paga. That's where the song, the girls say, she lost the self, she lost everything. Now she can go and dish with other kids. And that is what's happening in our communities. There are people, they dying with depression. If you look at the video whereby Mimi was reading the report of everything, but there was this guy that has a depression. That is what happens in our communities. Someone in that corner is doing that, and someone in that corner is doing that. There is no one is communicating with the other one that, why don't we do this together? Because one voice at times I said, can I do it alone? Can I wait for government? That will be forever. Can I do it alone? That will be too small. Can we do it together? That will be enough for all of us. When we were busy doing the poets about this hunger thing, what I've noticed is the anger. If you look at that, it's not only anger, but you're taking it from the blame. Who's blaming who? We are being blamed of being lazy, but we're not being lazy, but it's just that we don't have access to land, access to resources, access to funds, access of anything. If you are hungry in your corner, you just stay in your corner hungry because you are afraid. If you wake up as a young man and go to the queue in the kitchen and dish up, the community will start stigmatize you. Can you see how young he is? He doesn't have a shame of going in a queue and dish up. Where is he gonna get the food? And
Yeah.
and a bit, what I also noticed is that more of the blame is towards the women. That we women, we blame ourselves of the hunger that is in our houses, without thinking of men who are in the houses and who are out there, who are the ones who are supposed to be helping us when it comes to difficulties in providing for the kids. And that we don't, as is ANC, it's because of the burden that we have. not that our kids are our burdens, but the load, let me put it this way, that the load of work, the load that is on our shoulders, because a child will always, do that mama, and you always feel good, even if the father is around, but you find yourself as the first person. You are approachable, and so you wanna take the first step, forward, right? And like during the COVID, the COVID period, even men, our brothers, our men in the houses as well, they were so dependent on women. Those who are cooking, like the community kitchens, and also the women in the house, because they know when I'm at work, be it at work or not at work, but the women will be there, go out maybe to make a plan. So that's where the blame also comes into when it comes to women.
So I mean, I think kind of drawing into both of those comments, I think one of the big things that we've found coming up through this process is this kind of questions of stigma, and the kind of, like Mimi saying, like the emotions that are kind of held within this container of the original framing of the research, and what it means to crack that open, and to try and crack that open, and to make space for those emotions. And so I think what we're kind of stepping into now is a process of thinking about poetry as a vehicle for doing that. I know we're not the first. I think it's been done by many others before. It might be a nice chance. I mean, maybe I don't know if you've got other thoughts to add on to that, but just to say whether there's any others within this kind of network community, within the group here, that have been doing similar things, and if there's similar kind of experiences that have come from your side to make this a bit more of a two-way conversation around just exploring different vehicles for packaging and interpreting and using research in these ways. So if there are any comments from the floor, Mimi, if you've got anything you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, I'm also seeing a question from Helena Bota. I won't necessarily directly answer it, but it's a question that I can also empathize with on what you would like to take forward in research work and in life, and especially in the context now of even, FACT or Food Agency Cape Town, and having dialogues around or looking forward to having dialogues even around this poetry and around how this work might even land on the community or on the community members that are potentially going to see this. Because what happens a lot also with these discussions is that as it is happening now, but understandably so, that the research comes in English, so we already have a language barrier. So I think it's quite exciting to be able to interpret it in different languages. It's already opening up the space for that inclusivity and that accessibility. So I think there's a lot of power in that. And I think there was also a lot of power in the process in itself. And I don't know what we could potentially do with it to even, tap or look into the emotions that came up of there, and into looking into what other issues are coming out in communities like mental health, and that's the one thing that really was like a red, it was just flaring at me, was that issue, and that is what really touched me to even collaborate on that poem with Avio, is that as much as we're looking at this, but there's so much also happening at the same time within our communities.
Anybody who wants to come in, and then Luleka come in. I can't see any hands though, so I think you're good.
Okay. Also looking at the poetic side of the project, like Agency Cape Town, I think it's a better platform, because looking at it, it's like a horizontal inclusive learning platform for everyone, because remember, not everyone is good on writing like me, but when people are voicing out, like
Mm.
appraisal poets. They can just, when they feel, they always express their feelings through words on how do they feel on that. So that on its own can make a big and loud change in our communities, because most of the times we have events, festivals and everything where there are artists and everyone that is always, many people are getting involved on that platform. When this can be on poetic side, it's more horizontal, inclusive learning platform for many communities, the way that I see it, because it's a bigger voice than in the book, because not everyone is a bookworm or book friend, but when it's vocally, it's easy to hear it.
To add on that, when it comes to a poet and writing, I feel that poet is also an important tool in translating the research and writing in a way that, like she said, not everyone is literate, some are illiterate, and the research is not, it's based on everybody in the in our communities. I'd like to say that this way of writing and being and poetic writing, poetic expression will also help those in our communities whom they will find them expressing themselves in a violent way, you know, because not everybody who's doing violence, who's scandalizing the communities out there, they have, you know, it's taken from
processing the emotions.
Processing, yes, their emotions. But if they can come across such things, you know, and some will learn as to how to express themselves in an ethical way, then that, because not everybody is on the same level of saying it's violence due to poverty and hunger, you know. So this it plays an influential role also to our youth. Like, now I'm thinking now as I'm sitting here that there are kids that I work with, you know, in the gardens, and I do share with them some of the activities I do out there, like in terms of the research and stuff, and show them the book, and this is what I'm busy with when I'm not with you guys. And then to translate this to them, I'll always like give them just, okay, food, we're talking about food, the importance of food and all that. And now if were to share the videos to them, then I will also be able, it will also help me and them to kind of like get an idea of what's in the book as well. Because I believe it starts from grassroots.
I mean, I think that thing of involving young people, involving children, I think is really, really significant. And what you've also raised around providing, and I think it links back to Mimi's point around this casing and how we break open these casings within the spaces we work for emotions to come out in different ways and the links of that to violence, and you know, it's like really significant. So that's,
I think it's also a way to, for lack of better words, to humanize research, because in many times we deal with statistics, and the moment you deal with statistics, you remove all the emotional value and human value that could be added to the research. So the moment you open grounds of different ways of interpretation, you just literally you stick voice to stats, and that way it's more relatable, more approachable, more interactive, and so on and so forth.
I think what the research, I mean, I think what it failed to highlight that was that we were able to bring out in the poetry was the resilience of our people, is that that even through all of this, we still able to then grow, and we still able to dream, and like through all of this, I don't think the research doesn't speak about resilience, but that was something I wanted to highlight, was that we are resilient people, and doesn't matter what you throw at us, centuries of stuff thrown at us that we still keep going, and we're not going to stop. We're not going to stop growing. We're going to stay at it. And the fact that we're always talking about Africa's future is beautiful, because we're like, the past, that's not our story. That wasn't written for us. It wasn't given to us. That we are constantly imagining the future, and we want our future to be an inclusive future, one that we can actually look back on and say, yeah, we did it. We created what we wanted, and we didn't just accept what was given to us.
Yeah, I would love to also drawing from what Dylan is saying is also that, and I'm very passionate about this. Is that voice of because grappling with these issues and grappling with research that, you know, it's very bleak when you look at the stats. It's easier, I would rather say, to be able to discuss in depth, you know, the problem and, you know, the past and connect it to how it affects us now. But it's starting to the question around what food justice really means, you know, what the future of food, or at least what we want the future of food to look like. It's very hard to articulate that. And I think artists do play an important role in trying to also reimagine, or because I think creating or creativity comes from that imagination. And I think the task that we have for ourselves is trying to imagine a future that doesn't necessarily look like today, and it doesn't look like our past. You know, where does it come from? You know, so that space of imagination or reimagining or reaching something that we don't, you know, it's in the air. It doesn't, it's not tangible. And that's a really, really, really powerful sort of mode of expression, you know, to be able to speak from. Yeah.
I also think one of the main things that were highlighted was the time factor to it. You know, the past, present, and future, and how you link all of that, because the future is tomorrow, literally, and it's not a few days to come, and how we incorporate all of those time and there, because it's not parallel times, it's times just intertwining and being with each other, and just trying to create fertile, perfect environment for currents to be tomorrow and future at the same time. Yeah.
So I think a strong thing coming up there around the kind of the role of the imaginative and the, like, spaces for imagination and revisioning. And I suppose what I'm hearing you say is like that there's a lot, these poetic processes and other artistic processes are a lot more fertile in terms of people being able to show up into those visioning processes, which I think is really significant, because that's where so much of the work happens. So much, I think, of the kind of traditional research we do is describing a situation, and it's not really helping us to imagine forward into where it is we really want to go. I'm conscious that, Aviwa, you haven't said a lot, and I think also linking to this thing of mental illness was a theme that came up very strongly in your poetry, and just finding, and a lot of anger too. And I know those are themes that were raised by others. Whether you want to just, you know, just say a line or two, just a little bit about kind of your experience in this process, because I think your work was quite strong.
Yeah.
My experience in the process.
Yeah. Or reflecting on the role of poetry in terms of communicating this, dealing with kind of issues of anger, mental illness relating to food insecurity, from your perspective.
Okay, I'm just gonna be short and therapies. I really don't want to involve myself in this thing of mental health and food insecurity, but yeah, it does evoke anger somehow, because yeah, I once experienced this thing for the past few years, and yeah, I was definitely getting over it. And I live in the township, so each and every day, actually each and every second of my life, I see people going through the very same pain that I went through. And it's really hard, especially in these days, because it's not like the olden days whereby you could go to your neighbor and ask for something. If you do that now, it's a huge embarrassment. And no one is willing to help. It is now a dog-eat-dog country. And Yabona speaking about this really brings the past, of which I'm actually trying to forget that, because the impact it had on my mind is still there. You know, the thoughts, the fear, the anger, the mental illness. I haven't gotten over it because I'm still witnessing this. Yeah. At least if I was totally out of that box, it would have been much better. But as I've just said, I witnessed this every day of my life. And now I was amongst people who were actually discussing that matter. Yeah. And actually reflecting what I experience each and every day, which is really painful.
Yeah.
Because it's really not good. It's really not great. And as I said, I really don't want to say a lot because emotions that I don't want to reveal might be evoked somehow.
There's a lot, I mean, there's just a lot you shared. And I think one question would, to me, like linking to the process of poetry is coming from that space. What is your experience or your thoughts on the role of poetry and art in helping to break some of those questions of stigma, the emotion that you'd like? Have you got any thoughts on that?
Okay. As an artist or a poet in general, I would say poetry is a third eye. You know, we see beyond what people see. And it's the best way of expressing emotions. Yeah, and the, how should I put it? As poets, we always put a lot of emotions in our work. And now on my own, I know the pain that people are living through. So I actually don't struggle in getting in their shoes when I'm writing a poem. So I do have what it takes to act like I'm one of them, which is a great thing to them because it will make them actually feel better to actually see that they are not alone. Someone is also experiencing this. Someone is also going through this, and someone is recognizing their pain. I think you answered.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Do you want to wrap up for us? I'm conscious that it's past.
Yeah. I mean, I also just I really also have to commend the artists that were part of this process. And you know, even during the process, I had that awareness of how much we are asking people to give, you know, even in that, you know, I knew I was asking a lot, and then in the space, it was so blatant. I was like, yo, it's deep-seated emotion, it's trauma, it's a lot of things that, you know, as Aviva puts it, is maybe you would also rather forget, but then there's also how do we move forward, you know, and I think it's also digging into that is also a way of trying to move forward, and it's a beautiful sort of it's a beautiful platform to be able to speak and to be able to present this work, and knowing that it comes from such a deep seated place in each of the people sitting here. So thank you guys for that.
Yeah, I think with that we'll wrap up. Thank you for joining us. If there's any last questions, please pose them in the chat. But yeah, in the interest of wrapping up on time, we'll close now.
Yeah.